So my name is Claire Hamilton, and I'm part of the social media and outreach team here at MyFunScience. Today I'll be visiting with MyFunScience teacher Heather Barrieau, and she is going to be telling us about her live online biology class. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Claire.
And
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for taking the time to visit with me today and give me a tour of your online classroom. I'm looking forward to learning more about the classroom and learning a little bit more about how the online course works in general.
Cool. Well, I might just, do you mind if I just kind of share what my classroom looks like?
I think that'd be a fantastic way for us to get started.
Great. Well, this is what my biology classroom looks like. If your student logs into the link that I give to them, they will see here we're in biology week 23 of 30 weeks of school. And as you can see, we're talking about bacteria, protists, and we have a mushroom for next week for a lab. So that's kind of what is on my slides, what they'll see when they come in. They'll kind of see like a heads up, that's the week you're in. Maybe you're in the wrong class, maybe you're in the right class. And then over on the left side over here, I have kind of like my way to remind myself as a teacher what I need to accomplish during the class also, in case I kind of get a little off, which happens sometimes. But things that I wanted to accomplish for this week's class was a concept map on taxonomy, bacteria, review some viruses and bacteria. And I missed the news article today, but I can cover that next week. And then I talked about protists also today. So I did get through my class today, which is a good thing. And then up here on the top left, you can see where it says class discussion. That is the way for students who would log in as a participant. They have access to that throughout class. They can talk, they can chat, they can answer questions. They can say, wait a second, I didn't understand what you were saying. And a lot of times what you'll see is when I am teaching through my slides, here's like, I start typing answers in that they put in. I teach them how to remember certain things.
Yeah, so it really truly is an interactive environment that you have going on with them and them with each other, it looks like as well.
Yeah, and they can interact with each other. Sometimes they'll get a little down a bunny path, and I'll have to say, so we talked about different types of bacteria, why bacteria are different, and whatnot. So that was today's lesson. And then one of the other things that I did in class today was I came on with my other camera that I can show you, Claire. Maybe we can move through a few other things first. But I come on my camera, I switch it over to let them see how to maybe swab an agar plate, and that's what I did on my class in class today.
I think that part of the technology is incredibly fascinating. That that you can have that level of interaction with the students as well and show them how to do those things remotely. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So, so you were saying that you started out in chemistry, is that correct?
I did. I started out majoring in chemistry, and that's what I ended up majoring in. I couldn't get the biology classes that I wanted my freshman year, and because they were full. And so I started in chemistry, and then I started taking more biology classes after my first year. But I did end up majoring in chemistry, and I think that's helped me in multiple ways, because I think with chemistry you can understand how things work at a chemical level, not just in the okay, well here's the life of a cell, or here's what happens in a cell. You can actually kind of go a little bit deeper and understand maybe what's happening at the chemical level, and that helps explain what's happening in the biological world.
Yeah, so they're definitely complementary disciplines.
Absolutely. Don't ask me to go into physics. That one's a little bit rough for me.
So how long have you been teaching now?
Well, 5 years is when I started the online, but I was teaching labs up at the Western Washington University about 17 years ago. And so that's kind of when I first started doing some teaching and working on my master's in teaching. I did not finish my master's in teaching because I ended up staying home with my kiddos and starting a family and all that kind of stuff that happens. But about 5 years ago is when I came into the online world, and I started teaching my younger kids in about 2012, 2013 via homeschool.
So what would you say is one of your favorite things about teaching in this environment?
Oh, I would definitely say some of the relationships with the kids that I've got to make over the years. Some of them I've become mentors with. Some of them I've got to visit with. Some of them, I've had coffee with them. I have a plan to have dinner with one of my past students who I wrote a letter of recommendation for coming up at the beginning of or next weekend. So
Yeah. I I think that's
relationships.
fantastic that, that it can start out in this realm and then you have opportunities to actually interact with them in person over the years as well. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And some of my kids, because I do biology and chemistry, some of them I've had for 2 years. And, one of the girls I've known for 4 years now. And I met with her when we were traveling to the East Coast and I chat with her mom, and then you start getting their siblings in your class and you're like, oh, this is so fun. So
It is.
it's good.
Yeah. It builds on that whole community vibe.
Yeah,
That's so
yeah.
important
And
too.
sometimes, it works well with one kid, who does well in an online learning environment, but then maybe the sibling doesn't do as well in the class, but, because they have a different learning style. So you have to figure some of those things out too.
So, let's see. What have been some of the challenges, you were talking about that some kids do have a tougher time with the online courses. What are some of the challenges of the online environment, do you think?
And I think one of the biggest things is holding kids accountable, and that's kind of where, as a mom of a teenager, which is where I am teaching at. I'm not teaching some of the younger grades, but you start relenting some control and
Mm.
saying, well, hey, here you're going to have to figure this out. You have a teacher, and so there's accountability issues as you get, as they become more adult-like. And I think for me, one of the main reasons is why I wanted to switch over to some online schooling as a homeschooling parent was that I wasn't the only ones holding them accountable.
Right, they're
And I
getting
think
some of
that's
that information reinforced in
absolutely,
addition to the core subject that they're learning, they're getting some of that stuff reinforced by other adults.
absolutely. And I think, I'm flexible if there's things that come up, and I think that's one of the nice. Some teachers are not as flexible, um, and really hold fast and true to some of those dates. But I kind of make it a working relationship. Some students are like, they're turning things in right on the dot all the time, very, very responsible. But there's other students who I have been able to work with and say, okay, I realize that this might be a little bit harder for you. Maybe you don't have some of these skills. So it's like, okay, let's get on a different plan. And it's harder on me sometimes, but that's kind of where some students need to be too.
It's nice that you have that flexibility for those students, because that isn't something that is available a lot of times in a typical classroom environment, and a big reason why a lot of people choose homeschooling to begin with.
Yeah, and I think that, the flexibility is one of the big keys, and why we actually chose homeschooling was because of flexibility. And so as long as there's communication, things aren't going the way of the dodo bird, where they don't ever get turned in.
Right.
As long as like, hey, can I turn this in tomorrow? And there's communication. For me, I can't speak for any of the other teachers because I know some teachers are like, nope, it's due, and if it's not in, you get a zero. And I respect that too, because that really teaches some of the kids some accountability also.
Yeah. There are definitely benefits to both styles, I think. Let's see here. I always wanted to ask you, what are some of the aspects that you have appreciated in having your kids take courses through My Fun Science, since your um, kids are also students here?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things for me is that my relationship with not necessarily my daughter, but even with my son, and I love him just as much, is that he does not like being accountable to me.
Hmm.
He does better being accountable to other parents or other teachers and stuff like that. Um, so he does listen to me, but he does better, with his school when I'm not the one teaching him. And that's just something that we've had to work out together. Um, and then there's other times where he'll come to me and want to sit down with me and learn specifically chemistry this year for
Hmm.
because I'm teaching him chemistry. But he just, it's like he really needs some focused attention on my part. And, so that's one of the reasons why I've had my kids take other courses from other teachers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that as well from my own
Yeah.
parental experience.
Yeah. It's just like, it's not worth the parental strain for
No,
me to be like, get it done. It's like, he's like, Mom, I want you to be my mom, not be my teacher in
right.
this aspect. So
Yeah, yeah. And it's really important to maintain those relationships with your
absolutely.
children.
Yeah.
So we were earlier. You were showing me the petri dish, and I, I was wondering if you could go ahead and maybe show me how that works in the classroom environment. So how do you switch that over?
Okay. So what I end up doing is I just I turn off my face camera. So there's Claire. And what I end up doing is I will select a different camera that I have.
Okay.
And when I start a different camera, you'll see that I have,
Hmm.
and it's a small picture right now, but here's my petri dish. And so today in biology, what I was doing is I was showing them that they could take their petri dish, which over the weekend or last week they were to have prepared and put in the refrigerator until this week's part of the lab, which is where they were actually going to be swabbing.
Yeah, so
So
then they
last
could
week,
compare what you were showing them with what they actually had done to see
yeah. And so
their own
last week they
results.
prepared their agar dish, and then this week, here I have my dish, and I showed them how you could um, cut it in half if you wanted to,
Hmm.
and have two different sides. And then what I did is I said, here's my control side with no variable. And I took this was sterile earlier. I took it out of a bag and I showed him how to, collect a sample. And I did it on my desk.
Okay,
Um,
that could be
and so
frightening.
I so get a good sample, right? It could be frightening. Hopefully not too frightening. And then I told them they shouldn't be opening up their petri dishes
Hmm.
until they're ready to actually, swab their
Sample.
plate and swab their sample. So I opened up my petri dish, which I'm not going to do because I've already done this one,
Hmm.
and I showed them how to swab back and forth, and I labeled it my desk. And again, I drew a line here because this side I'm going to make it so there's no variable. And on this side, I'm going to take a sample, which I have not done yet. And because I just haven't had the time since I was finished teaching. And I'm going to put some sort of variable on here. I might do hand sanitizer. I might do a little bit of bleach, but I'm going to introduce a variable on this side that sees if it prevents any growth of the bacteria or anything in this petri dish. Now,
Awesome.
this petri dish, again, I split in half. Um, the other petri dish, I did split in half also because I only made two, but I encourage them to um, make four or more petri dishes.
Okay.
One has to have a variable. This one I swabbed my keyboard, and then on this side I did a fingerprint. So we'll see what ends up growing on those. But I told them that one of their samples had to include a variable. And I want them to compare one where it's just, a sample growing and see if that variable did something different. What I did suggest to them, if they had multiple plates, they could do multiple variables.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I said is, like maybe you choose one where there's no variable, one has bleach in it, maybe, or Lysol wipes. And then maybe if they want to add an extra variable, they could say, I want to compare that to maybe an essential oil and see which one has the least amount of growth. So that's kind of what the lab, I showed them how to swab and set that up today. Told them that they can't open it and they can no longer touch it once they have their swabbing. And then
just store them appropriately until they can look at them.
Yeah, and then another thing that I did, and I only have part of it, I don't know where the other part is, but for chemistry, we just got done doing gas laws. And so what I did is, if I had the funnel, which I don't have the funnel and the Play-Doh near me right now, but this was last week's or 2 weeks ago, what you can do is I put this in there and I made a vacuum by sucking the air out and showing them how to do Boyle's Law in my chemistry lab.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you do the labs with them like this, do you typically make that screen larger for them as well?
Yes.
Okay. So that they can get a really good idea of what it is that they're supposed to do.
Yeah, and they're not actually like this lab. I just did in class. They didn't have to do this one at home.
Okay, so that wasn't when they have to recreate.
They don't have to recreate that one. So it's more for them. I just don't like, usually I don't like my face really big, so I keep it small. And then I'll switch it around when it's time.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of how my in-class labs work. But there are times where they do virtual. They do a lot of virtual labs also.
And what is the um, kind of the difference in the virtual labs?
Well, so the physical labs, like they have to order a lab kit for biology. And when they do their physical labs at home, like the one coming up, if you look at my slide here, next week, they're going to be doing a physical lab where they're going to dissect a portobello mushroom. And that's their at-home lab. That's something that you can't really send in a lab kit. So the lab kit wouldn't include the mushroom. But what the lab kit does include is maybe a beaker and maybe some pH test strips. And I'm just trying to see if I have anything here that is included in the lab kit, but I think it's all put away right now. And so they might have to do a pH lab where they're testing the pH of different samples. And so the lab kit would come with pH paper, so you don't have to buy the pH paper. Another lab that the biology students do is a glucose lab or a blood kit. So they get to test their blood type in the lab. And so the lab kit will come with your blood typing lab kit. And so everything's included in that part.
So then they'd be doing these outside of the classroom and then reporting results back to you in those cases?
And I have them work on a formal lab report throughout this year. They're called IMMRD labs, where they have an introduction, method, material, results, and discussion. And we talk about each section, and sometimes I have them work on just one section. Other times, twice a semester, I have them actually write up a full IMMRD lab where it's typed, proper headings, where they have to include background, hypothesis, and results, qualitative, quantitative, all in the typed up lab report.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So is there a particular curriculum that you teach from, or is this your own curriculum?
I really follow the book of Science Shepherd, which is, let me see if I can find the book. It's right here. It's by, this is what it looks like. It's a Science Shepherd book. And I really like this book. I think it's by Scott Hardin, and I think he delves deep enough into each topic and gives more information than they probably need for some biology. But I don't know. I usually take what's in the book, and then I also have added and my own stuff into it, which I think most teachers do. Is I'm not going to teach this, but I'm going to teach this aspect of it,
Right.
and so I mix some things in with it also.
Awesome.
And one of the big things that I've done this last year is I created something called the Big Idea, because I want students to start thinking a little bit bigger than just knowing the facts, which
Mm.
biology can be, okay, this is this, this is this, this is this, but I want them to understand, well, how does this all work together? So the Big Idea, I have taken questions from maybe AP style or CLEP style questions and adapted them and said, you can use your book, but I want you to just really try to um, talk to
Apply.
me, discuss what you've read in light of this question. That might be an AP question.
Fantastic. So yeah, so it's helping them prepare for those skills that they'll need for those kind of testing environments as well.
Yeah, and because I think what happens in an online class is you end up teaching to students who are just taking biology for the biology credit, but then you also have students who want a little bit more of a challenge.
Hmm.
So um, it gives that variation in your lessons that they can
They can take it to that next level.
take it to the next level. Um, and at the end of at the end of the year, I do have a cumulative biology test that is optional at this point. That if they do pass the cumulative um, with a passing grade, then
Mhm.
they can take it as an honors credit because every single one of those questions comes from an honors test. So
Fantastic. So do they then, um, since they are honors level, um, get an additional certification for that then?
I don't personally give them an honors. I just tell them that they can take it at the
They can
honors
test
level
for that,
because
yeah.
it has they've answered all those questions, solved it, and I usually say an 80% is passing. So any 80% and above, I would give it to them as an honors. It is multiple choice, and it's quite challenging. So
Awesome. Yeah, that's a fantastic opportunity for those folks that would, like you say, like the additional challenge.
yeah,
So, just in general, how would a parent know if their student is ready for this class?
yeah. Um,
Are there any prerequisites even?
yeah. So for biology, I don't really. There's no listed prerequisites. Obviously, it is a high school level class. And I think what happens when you get to those high school level classes, you're going to expect a little bump in the homework, a little bit more of a self directed um, class where the student needs to be prepared for that. I would say, some of the things that would be beacon points for me is that they are able to have a little bit of time management, that they're reading their material on their own and can kind of work through some worksheets on their own. Um, how can they manage their homework load?
Hmm.
And again, that's all time management. And if they can't, then do they have the skills to ask for help and communicate with somebody? And I think that's kind of one of the biggest things in an online learning environment is if you get behind, it's because you're not asking for help.
Yeah, they need to learn to be advocates for themselves.
They really do. And I think some kids are totally ready for that at the high school level, and some kids are totally unprepared for that when it comes to high school level classes.
So that leads in a little bit and maybe even touches on my next question which was how do you teach things like direction?
Um, how do I teach direction?
Like giving them the skills that they need, the direction that the
They
directions.
they
Yeah.
need for. not just in biology, but just skills in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So some of the skills, again, time management. What I do, and if you can bear with me, what I will do is I will share my screen with you and show you um, what it looks like when they log into my biology, not just the classroom, but the class website.
Okay.
And when they log into the class website, they will see something that looks like this. Here's our biology homepage, okay? And so they have some announcements that they get to look like. Here's like some tips that I share with them, the best laid plans. How should I plan out my week? So then every week, if you go to this week's class page, I have a lesson preview, and then I also have assignments. And I say, well, day one, here's your classes. You're going to come to class on day one, and I have class notes every week. So they can follow along, fill in the blank. Some weeks I require those to be turned in. Some weeks I do not require them to be turned in. Day two, they would do their virtual lab, and it includes a worksheet. And then day three, they can start their bacterial lab. Now that's not due until week 25, but I want them to start the growth process. Day four, right here, read chapter 22, which is our next lesson, and watch the videos that I have on all the protests. Okay, and so I have some videos.
There's room for them to do some self-pacing in there. They know what's going to be expected by the time that you next meet.
Yep,
And
I published this. The Saturday before class. And so the other, like day 5, they have one more worksheet, which is going into our next lesson, protests, and then also to do that big idea. Okay. So that's kind of what they will see on a weekly basis with me, so there's no like, what's going on? I don't know how to manage this. I don't know what I'm doing. It's all there.
Yeah, they have a good heads up of what's coming and the time that it's probably going to take them to accomplish that as well. So if they
and obviously with labs, it takes a little bit longer. So I always tell them if there's a lab that week, and especially in IMMRD, expect a little bit more time. I try to do my worksheets. My worksheets should take no more than 30 to 45 minutes, but then you always have those students that get it done in 20, and you have other students that it takes an hour and a half. So depends on your students.
The actual time in the live online session, how long is that?
So each class, each week for 30 weeks is going to be 90 minutes. So we start, let's say, at the top of the hour at 9 o'clock. Most of the time in my biology class, I get a 3 to 5 minute break somewhere in there where I can give my voice a rest, and then the students can get up and use the restroom if they want to. Sometimes if I'm moving through things fast and I'm trying to get a big lesson in, we forego the break. Today we had a couple extra videos that I wanted to show them. We didn't do a break today, but that's rare in my biology. Chemistry, I usually forego the breaks because there's so much in that class.
Jam-packed.
Yeah.
So we've already talked a little bit about homework and what that's sort of like. Is there anything that you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, well, so for homework, besides maybe having a worksheet or a virtual lab or those physical labs, the other things I have, again, chapter reading notes. Sometimes I have them turn those in. So as they're reading through the chapter, I have reading notes that I have made where they need to fill in the blank. Sometimes that helps a lot of kids, depending on how they learn. And then I'll have class notes that sometimes will help them pay attention in class a little bit, because being in an online class, I know from experience, my son, where, I'll walk in, I'm like, how's it going? And I'll see YouTube up at the same time as the class will be up. So sometimes those class notes are very beneficial for the student. That being said, I will also do discussions, and I also have extra credit in there also.
Yeah,
So
so it's just
one of my
some things to keep the engagement level up.
yeah, one of my new things that I added this year was called Science in the News, and it's a year-long project where they are to collect 10 different articles um, from things that they see in the news. And then each article they need to write like a 3 to 5 sentence paragraph, just a short paragraph of what they saw in that article. And so that's called Science in the News that I
That's cool.
added
Is
this
there
year.
an opportunity for them to kind of share their findings with each other too?
At the end, once they post everything, yeah, they'll be able to do that. So,
Awesome.
but again, it's a year-long project. So, um, we do a discussion on creation, evolution, um, because I have my perspective. I have kids who might not have that same perspective, even come into our class, even though it's from a Christian based viewpoint. Um, we still have different perspectives, and so I come up with 5 different questions and topics that they get to present in a 3 to 5 paragraph um, topic discussion, and then they get to respond to each other in that. And I require them to respond to at least 3 different posts in that.
Yeah, that's some great skills right there too. Are there questions that you typically get from parents or students actually about the biology class that we haven't touched on yet?
What are some of the questions? How much time should be allotted is a big one because it is, as a biology class, a lot of kids are coming in either maybe they took physical science, which can be counted towards high school level, but
Mhm.
bio or earth science, those are high school level classes also. But sometimes biology might be that first one that they take as a freshman in high school, or maybe they'll take it as an 8th grader. And so a lot of parents are like, well, how much time should I plan for them to set aside each week? And I would say outside of class, for the 90 minutes of class, then we have the outside portion. Anywhere from 4 to 6 hours would be a high school level class. So
Okay.
that's what I would assume.
Yeah, and I think that's great preparation for kids that might be going on to college courses later as well.
Yeah,
Just kind of, again,
absolutely.
to that time management piece, kind of
Yeah,
getting them
and
used to that idea.
it might take them 3 hours to do all the work. It might
Hmm.
take them 2 hours, depending on how fast they are and how thorough they are. But
Hmm.
I would allot 4 to 6 hours because for you to get so many hours in for the year,
Yeah.
um, for those states that do require logging of hours, because some states do require, you to actually put down, okay, you studied for 4 to 6 hours, you need 180 hours for a full credit class.
Yeah. So, do you think, um, are there, take a little break there. I've got a door opening and closing. So,
Oh, that's fine. That's okay. That's what happens when we're at home. We get
exactly.
we get
So,
cats jumping on my desk in the middle of class sometimes.
dogs
So
barking, people
yeah,
coming to the door, all those kind of fun things.
absolutely.
Some of the other challenges of the homeschool environment. Are there key points or things that you'd like our audience to be aware of or dive deeper into if they're considering the live online biology class for their homeschool students?
Absolutely. I would like to just say my goal for these kids is one, to get them to love biology first and foremost. To kind of Biology is one of those things where it's like it's really easy to study because we're these biological living beings, and so one of my things is maybe they need to take a temperature. They can measure their armpit. We talk about genetics. They can look at themselves in the mirror and go, okay, are my earlobes attached, or what kind of earwax do I have? Those types of weird things, right? And so it's very hands-on in that sense. So I want them to be engaged, and I want them to have fun with it, because it doesn't have to be boring.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes it is hard because we are in a virtual setting, but and there is still a lot of learning to do when you're studying biology, especially if you want to go deep, which I try to go deep, but I also try to give the kids the big picture at the same time. I think for some of the key points for parents contemplating signing up for biology is to make sure that we have communication. I think that's one of the biggest things is when you do an online class, um, just because I'm teaching your students doesn't mean that we don't have to communicate. And I think that's a big portion of your child's success.
Yeah, it's still important for everybody to be involved in the process.
Yeah. No, I don't. The parents don't have to grade. The parents don't have to that, but they still do need to check in and check the grade book because it's like, hey, why are you missing 18 assignments? Um, well, because your kids aren't turning them in. Maybe you haven't checked the grade book. So checking the grade book is an important thing too.
And how, like, where do the parents go to do that part for their
Well,
students?
really, they would need to know their students' login. And they
Okay.
would go into that class web page that I showed you. There's a grade book there that really allows for parents to say, okay, you've turned this in, you've turned this in. Why haven't you turned this in? Or the parents could on Saturday or Sunday when I publish each page, the parents can sit down and actually say, okay, what do you have due this week if the parent wants to do that. Yeah, and they don't have to. It's just a recommendation.
Now, if the parents have multiple students and or their student is in multiple classes at MyFunScience, can they see that information for each of the classes in the same place, or are there multiple things that they have to log into?
Well, if they're in PSL, I think, there's no parent account for PSL, but as long as they know their kids log in, they can go in and see what their kids
And
have
they would
for
see
each of
all
the
of the
classes.
courses that they're in. Awesome. So, why do you think the model of live online STEM courses uniquely serves a need for homeschool families?
Well, I think that one of the biggest things for that is science and math seem to be one of the hardest things for some people to teach. For me, it's English and languages. So I can teach the science and math at home, but I always had to go and put my kids in the English and language classes. So science can be hard, especially to stay motivated to do some of those labs. I know even for some of the kids, it's hard to get those labs done. Um, at home. But if you're being held accountable to doing those labs on a weekly basis, it makes it a little bit easier to do that. And so I think what My Fun Science provides in terms of specifically, we're speaking to biology right now, is it gives a nice backbone for the parents and some runway for them to kind of say, okay, your teacher's got you, they're teaching you, they're grading, um, they're going to hold you accountable to doing some of those labs. But I do need to check in every now and then and make sure that uh, you're staying on task,
They're on
but
track.
it does help navigate those waters of making something that might be more challenging to do at home if you're not in other circumstances um, to just bring it into a classroom setting, even though it is at
So I think I just have a couple other questions for you today. I'm
home.
sure this may still generate some more questions for parents, and that's all right. We welcome them to, um, email us and ask those questions if we haven't already answered them through this. But a couple of things that I was thinking of, do students have to have a computer for this environment? Is that a requirement?
Um, I think the biggest yes, I'm going to say yes. They can use a tablet and they can use, a mobile to watch certain things.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it always is easier if they have a computer available. I have found that what happens with mobile tablets and stuff like that is maybe they can't type into the class discussion to ask a question. Or if we are coming online as a group, which I didn't show you, but we do have breakout rooms sometimes, or we go into different um, sub
Groups.
classes from this classroom where they have their own pods that they can type into and answer questions, or maybe they're interacting as a group, and we call those breakout rooms, that they can't interact that way. So I would definitely suggest that a computer and internet access obviously is probably the best, um, because why take a virtual online class if you're not going to have the right tools?
Right. If you're not going to be able to use all the things available in the
It's just,
most robust part of the environment.
I mean, if you're going to be doing an online class, be online, get the right tools. Yeah.
So another one kind of along those lines, if I have if my student for some reason has to miss a class, how hard is it for them to get the material and get caught up?
It's super easy because I record all my classes, and then on our class webpage, I have a class recording link where they can go and rewatch any portion or any video that they want to. Except for today was the first time this year that I forgot to record my chemistry class. So 23 weeks into the year, I forgot to record my chemistry. So I gave them some alternate ways that they can learn and
Get the
study that
information.
subject. So
Well, I think that's about all I have. Is there anything that you would like to cover for folks that you don't think that we've touched on yet?
I think we've touched upon everything, but I'd love to have your kids in my class. So I love meeting new students.
Well,
That's
thanks
pretty
for your
much it.
time, Heather. I really appreciate it.
All right.
And yeah, have a great year in biology.